Hey, welcome again to my next vlog, and I'm so excited to have a very special guest today to interview about leadership and management. And of course, we will spend a few minutes talking about my shameless plug again, my new book, Likability. And so this person is very famous, and I've known her forever. And I mean, that's literally, I've known her forever. She is my little sister. This is Kathy Richardson today, and she has so many things I could say about her that I won't add to the to the interview.
Good.
As brother and sister, we have a bunch of material on each other. We'll try to keep that contained. Some of you will beg for that by email. I know you will, and so maybe we'll decide if we want to do that in a separate interview, which you'll have to be private, of course. But she's a not only a businesswoman, successful businesswoman, and she's got so much talent. I could talk about it forever. She's not only a great musician but she's a great businesswoman. She's done a lot of things. She's an entrepreneur. She's had her own business. She supports businesses. She's a national speaker. She's a certified executive coach. I mean, I could go on and on. But I'm gonna let her tell you a little bit about just her recent successes and where she is now. And so Kathy, we're glad to have you. It's going to be a great interview and a fun podcast. So just kind of let the listeners know a little bit more about you, and then we'll start our interview here.
Well, thanks for asking me. Excited about this. Well, one of the things that they say makes work the most fun is when you get up every day and you don't know exactly how that day is going to look. And so for 30 years, I've been in the real estate industry. No 2 days are ever the same, but that career in real estate has had a lot of different types of work that I've done. Obviously, I still work very strongly and heavily in the sales and marketing and listing of property. And that's my bread and butter. But also during this time, I have developed a lot of training that I do in real estate, which ranges from local realtor board leadership training, local real estate board, boards of directors, as I serve as a consultant for those. I teach pre-licensing courses for adult education, people that are changing careers or wanting to get into the real estate business. And I also teach a lot of continuing education for current realtors. And then on a more one-on-one basis, I do a lot of career coaching with realtors, and also people outside of the real estate industry. I do some coaching as well. So no 2 days are alike.
Yeah, and that's exciting. That's kind of how my life rolls too. What's interesting, Kathy, as you know, and probably you and I should write a book at some point about some of our upbringing. We had a very interesting upbringing. We'll talk about that. I think most of you might be slightly interested in it, but we have very artsy kind of parents. I explained to a men's group I was speaking to the other day that I didn't know everybody's mom and dad wasn't like that. And so a night at dinner with Kathy and I poking at each other and trying to get ourselves in trouble, my dad might be reaching over Kathy painting an oil painting, and we're listening to a Smothers Brothers comedy record. My mom's slamming dishes, and they're both. And then I didn't know that everybody's dad wasn't an artist, a musician, and took me hunting and fishing. So it's crazy. We had this crazy upbringing. But I was thinking about this, Kathy. We can talk a little bit about it. But Kathy and I both have music degrees, but we both our lines converged later in adult life. We both have been in the business world now for lots of years. She's been in it longer than I have. But I think because of the genetic weird gene pool that we have, we both had this musician side of us. We had this driven aggressiveness. Our mother's still living from her. It's just crazy. That's another conversation. But we also had the arts and business is a combination of our upbringing. So I think it's helped us. You speak to this. I think it's helped us both be successful, because I don't go into business without being an artist. And I think some of my best questions are over my right brain. Kathy's the one who could actually do math, and she actually understands a spreadsheet, a P&L, how to balance her checkbook, all of that. I didn't get any of that. So speak to that for a second, because I think people might appreciate the diversity that we have in our upbringing that I think brings an element of leadership to our lifestyle.
Well, and I think one of the things that's played heavily into a successful real estate career, especially in residential, is I'm very visual. We talk a lot about visual learning and auditory learning and kinesthetic learning and all that, but I'm able to go in and visualize how people, how their lifestyle or their furniture or whatever will fit into a space that might not even be renovated at this point. But then interestingly enough, as I began to teach, and you know this as well as I do, that when you begin to teach, that's when you really start to learn. And that's one of the reasons I continue to teach. But I remember the first time that I told my children that I was the only real estate math instructor in our school, which is the largest school in the state of Mississippi. And they got a charge out of that because they had a hard time visualizing a liberal arts person. But when I began to teach math, I really began to understand numbers and spreadsheets and all those sorts of things. And so I do think that, sometimes when I look at my personality profile, and I'm a very outgoing and gregarious person with new groups of people and that kind of thing. Well, that tends to lend to people that are not focused and systems driven, but I am. And so somebody asked me about that, and I said, well, I remember as a child, my parents saying, "You're scatterbrained." They would tell me that all the time. Well, that's because they said that, I began to think, well, I don't want to be scatterbrained. So I began to look at processes and that kind of thing. So I'm very driven with spreadsheets and things like that. But I love the designing and the visual part of all of that as well. So I think that's where all the artistic stuff comes in.
Well, I think it's important for what you do, especially I never thought about that, staging a home and that right brain. But what I found a success in the fact that I don't think like a CEO, but I'm coaching a CEO, or I'm training high-level executives they literally don't need my help to build their financial portfolio. What they need my help is to what I call crack the code of thinking. And so it's interesting that we both kind of converged our lifelines into doing that. And she's playing it down. My dad he put his, listen, it was crazy. I watched him my whole life. I had to shine my shoes on Saturday night. He would take his wallet at night. He'd come home, always buttoned up and dressed, tie kind of a thing. And he would take his wallet and put his watch around his wallet and then put it on the dresser in the same stinking place every night. His wingtips went in the same place at the end of the bed. And, I've found my underwear on the ceiling fan before. I mean, it's just kind of, that drove him crazy.
All of the bills in his wallet had to be facing the same way.
Yeah. So all of you that wonder how people overcome these obsessive compulsive behaviors, maybe we didn't ever do that. But you know what? This is so good for the leaders that are listening and the managers that are listening. And I know the people that are my clientele and that listen to the podcast and the vlogs and respond are from all idioms of lifestyle and genre of work and all of that. So you business folks will get the fact that Kathy developed hard corners around her leadership. And I wish they'd just call me scatterbrained. My daddy says other things to me about it, but I know I'm a knucklehead. I know it. And I'm still a knucklehead and I need to mature. But what's wonderful is all of us, and Kathy's also spoke to the fact that about behavioral assessments, and we use those. Kathy uses those with her clients, and that helps us to help a person understand how they need to be shaped in coaching. That's important to know what our strengths, propensities of behavior are and what they're not, and the places that we can develop. And I think that's why she's not only a great instructor, but she's a great coach. And those are two idioms as well. And I'm a loudmouth like she is, and I'm gregarious and upcharged and jacked up, whatever you want to call it. But to coach, I've learned to pace my personality, which is very important to this leadership discussion. Now, what I want to do, Kathy, let's talk about likability. You're something you got out of it. Hope you got something out of it. A favorite chapter or a concept, or maybe just a passage out of a couple of chapters. And let's talk, and then we'll go from there. We'll talk from that, those comments.
Well, there were several chapters that really, really spoke to me, but the one that I kind of looked at and thought about a lot was the one you had on Be Fun.
Mm-hmm.
And this is something that I encounter a lot in the real estate training world. There are agents that have been selling longer than I have, some less than I have. There's some people that you and I both are very much made this way. I'm a learning junkie. I want to learn. I want to read all the time. But there are lots of people that come into a continuing education class only because the state of Mississippi requires them to have 16 hours of continuing education every 2 years, which is among the lowest in the country. But they'll come into class and they'll say, "I just want you to know I didn't want to be here and I would rather have a root canal today."
Yeah. Yep.
And I'll say, "Well, I'll make a deal with you. If you feel that way at the end of the class, I want you to tell me that. But I think you're going to find out that you're going to have fun in here today.
Yeah.
Hopefully you'll learn something, but I think you're going to leave here and say this class was different from anything." And I had a guy that came up to me and he came in and told me that. He said, "You know what? I'm mad about this. I don't want to have to do this. I don't need to know anything. And I'd rather have a root canal." And by the end of the class, he told me, he said, I've never sat in a class like this." I said, "Well, like I say, I hope they don't judge me on what you learned, but I think you will remember what we did in here today, because it was not lecture. It was a combination of visual and auditory and hands-on and all those sorts of things." And I think fun is what is expected in society now. They can get anything they want from the internet. They can get it quickly. And so we have a big responsibility to engage them in a way that's fun, that they may not have ever experienced in a classroom.
Yeah. So one of the things in the book, and I don't know if you recall this part, but there's some brain research in the fun chapter. Just like if you want somebody to listen to you, you do have the visual, auditory, kinesthetic learning concepts or techniques baked into your training. But if you want to, it's funny that we'll remember something a comedian said, but we won't remember something a president of a country said, because they delivered it and they forced it through the filter of humor, which opens us up emotionally. And as great leaders, what happens is all you care about is they get it and they can act upon it. So that was part of the reason for writing that. Anything specific in that chapter that you would like to recall for our learners on the end of this podcast?
Well, one of the things that I thought about in here, and I have classes from, all walks of life, and especially if they're pre-licensed, they might be from 18 to, I've had up to students up into the 80s. And I always ask at the beginning, do I have any lawyers in here? Do I have any preachers in here? And I almost invariably have preachers. And so sometimes in my class, I'll have a little series of jokes that I tell, and I might tell something that's just a little bit off color, and I say, "Sorry, Pastor," and it just gets a big laugh because, I'm relating to those people in a fun way. And usually the pastors are the ones laughing the hardest. Talking about world leaders, I heard a great story that I think you might have already heard or enjoy, but one of the reasons that we all loved Ronald Reagan was because he was funny.
Yeah.
It was fun. And right after Queen Elizabeth's death recently, somebody was telling on the television, I think it was Bill Bennett. He said, one of my favorite stories about Ronald Reagan, he was over riding horses with Queen Elizabeth because she loved to ride horses, and they had that bond. And the horse, during the time they were riding, passed some gas. And she said, "Oh, I am so sorry." And he said, "Don't worry about it. Up until you said something, I thought it was a horse." That's a great story. And that makes you, from what she says, he was her favorite president of all time. And so I think fun is something that we have to really, really develop and work on, because now it's just much harder to get people to hear us when we are trying to teach them something or share something with them or coach them in what we're doing.
Yeah, and the whole premise of likability is not just to shape our personalities to be likable, it's about influence. And people that have humor, and if you're an instructor or a coach or you're delivering a keynote, whatever it is, if you can force some of your training through something funny, they will get it. Especially, so I think that when you think the chapter is about shaping behavior with those that you're trying to lead, and you build an environment. I don't know what our parents said all
Mhm.
the time, obviously, but my mom, sometimes it seems like I went to something and it ended up a party breaking out, and she coined, I was a party in the box. Well, I did it to make the party shape to my personality sometimes, but there's, some of those lifelong friends that were at those things growing up, well, we have a strong bond, and you have the same thing, because I know you're always cutting up and having fun somewhere. But I think it's important as a leadership trait to work on it. And I said in that chapter, not everybody needs to try to deliver a canned joke, but you can lighten up things. And because what we're trying to do is build influence, right? People
Right.
want, they're drawn. It's a law of attraction that happens when you have humor. They will find you. You don't have to find them. Any other comments about that? And I'll ask you a couple of other things, and then we'll wrap the program.
And I do think, you were very specific in, making sure you know your audience. Don't necessarily laugh at yourself,
Yeah.
which is one of the things I loved about Johnny Carson. But, you want to be careful that you don't offend people. There's certain subjects that you just don't talk about, no matter what your situation is. And so you were very good about, listing those and giving you something to think about. And there's always a time and a place, and you discuss the balance between professionalism and having a good grasp on your employees and whoever you're working with, but also having fun. And don't ever want to cross those to the point that you're not being effective in what you're doing.
Yeah, and that's such an important thing for those of you that are listening, that are managers that are trying, or maybe emerging leaders in an organization, or you have been endowed with a leadership role and you're struggling on building motivation and alignment and influence. So what Kathy's talking about is that you better know your audience. And this is how I coach. And that is, be very preemptive in your downtime. And when you're not in front of people, or you're not coaching, or you're not running a meeting of some sort, think about where the boundaries are. So fun, you want to explore a little further than you might think the boundaries typically would be, but then you may have to back off a little bit, because if you offend, you've lost them. That's why I think I said in that chapter, I never talk politics or religion. That never comes from the stage or from the training or even in conversation in coaching. Now, I've had some long-term clients that have finally asked my opinion on a couple of those kind of volatile topics, and we had a trust at a level that I could change hats for a moment and be a friend to them. But yeah, but exploring humor is just as vital as you working on your content. So how could you have the audience have fun with you? I think that's a great point that you brought out, because you're developing your leadership skill. And if you're the guy or gal that is hoping to ascend in an organization, humor will help you get there if you can regulate it and not get too far out there. I've told clients, just don't be stupid. I mean, work on it and think of it. It actually grows your executive presence, is a term that's used. You will have more presence in a meeting if you can tell a joke everybody likes and then make your point. Bam, it's a sucker punch. So you've just led through the portal of humor. So Kathy, I want to so you've worked in so many environments. You're a volunteer. You give your musical talents. You love the symphony. You love the visual arts. You're in real estate. Not only that, you're training real estate law and all these crazy topics. I mean, they're wonderful topics that I can't even imagine even attempting to learn to teach. But in your life experience with in business world and in volunteer, what are some of the couple best practices that you have found that have worked for you? So So they don't have to work for anybody else, but they work for you in finding success and continue to create successful activities in your life. What would they be? One or two?
Just to put it in a nutshell, I have built my entire real estate career on building relationships. I'm a relational seller. It's very difficult for me to do a transaction. I'm gonna get on my phone and I'm gonna do a transaction, and I want to see you. I want to know you. I want to know what your kids are doing. I want to know how you're feeling today. And those have served well for me. People will say, well, how do you get repeat business? Well, you go sit down and have a cup of coffee with them, even when you're not selling them something. And so I think that's really, really an important thing. But I've had people tell me before, when we did a real estate transaction, at the end, they said, you were very professional, but you were fun. Yeah. You were a lot of fun. And so I think those two things, just, you don't take yourself too seriously. And I've told people before, especially if I list a house for a friend, I say, when this is all over with, if I have to come down to making this transaction work or being your friend, I'm going to choose friendship every time. Yeah, and that's always come before, the bottom line or the commission. And so 30 years of that, and I'll have a lot of people probably at my birthday party. I don't know that I'll always be the richest person in the room, but I do feel real good about the legacy that I've built with that, and that I'm training other people to do.
Yeah, that's really a great word. And because so many of business people that would be listening to this, and there'll be plenty of nonprofit people and listening to the podcast and watching this, they will get this, but they may never have really jumped into this idea of relationship selling or relational. I actually have a course I teach on the relational ecosystem. It's building a system that feeds itself. It stays healthy because you have all these friendships, you have all these relationships, you've figured out your compatibility. So people see you as a trusted advisor more than a business person. It's not transactional, just like you said. So those that are listening, just send me an email at DrTrove@troveinc.com. If you want to have a further discussion about this, Kathy and I'd be glad to get on a phone call with you if you want to have some of that kind of phone coaching about it. But I want to thank Kathy so much. She's very busy, and she and I both, we had to find a spot that we could even make this happen today. And she's having some remodeling done at her house as well. Got 2 dogs, and I should have put Ian, your husband, before the 2 dogs. And I love him. He's a very talented guy as well. And I'm hoping to have him on as well. But thank you so much for being on here. And I look forward to maybe we writing a book together or something here soon.